Her specific role was to be a hostess at a brand new attraction called America Sings. Disney had basically converted it into a rotating stage, and they put up partition walls all along this rotating stage to create 6 distinct stages. And then after the 6th act was done, Debbie dutifully climbed back onto the stage. She said goodbye to the audience, and then as that audience was leaving the theater, she turned around and walked towards the back of the stage she was on. And in the center was this circular, fairly tall storage room. The gap between the outside of the storage room at any point around it and the inside of the back wall was maybe a couple of inches. It was pretty narrow, but it was big enough that a person in theory could get stuck back there. So it was a real hazard. She decides to move from the stage she's on to the adjoining stage. And when she does that, she either trips or falls or something happens which causes her to fall into the narrow space between the 2 back walls of the 2 stages she was on. Each of the 6 stages that made up this attraction had a fairly tall back wall. And behind each of these 6 back walls that were kind of in a ring was the center of the actual attraction. This storage room did not rotate. It was stationary. The stages and their respective back walls, they rotated around this storage room. However, Disney did not put any specific safeguards in place to prevent their staff from intentionally or unintentionally going into this space. They just told their staff to not go back there and be careful. So she falls through that gap and then gets wedged between the outside of the storage room and the back of one of the back walls. She tries to pull herself up and pull herself out of the space, but she realizes she's stuck. And so she starts to panic and she starts screaming for help. None of the staff hear her, or they don't recognize that this is a real call for help. And this new wave of people that are coming in, the new audience, they're all talking loudly. There's music playing. They don't really hear her. And anyone that actually did hear her calling for help, they would later say they thought it was part of the show. These stages, they start to move because the show is going to start. And because Debbie has nowhere to go, when the stage began to rotate, she got forcibly dragged because the stage was just going to keep on going until it reached its next position. And so finally, after it dragged her all the way to its next position, Debbie didn't die. She was grievously injured, but she was alive. But again, the audience, even though they heard her screaming, they assumed it was part of the show. And apparently the staff also heard her screams and convinced themselves it was just no big deal. And so 2 to 4 minutes later, when the act was complete, the stage began to rotate again. And she's still not dead. She's screaming out for help. No one is coming to help her. And so the entire show would play out with the stage rotating through all of its sections. And then finally, at the end of the show, when one of the audience members alerted the staff that, hey, you should really go check out that screaming we heard. And at that point, they went for a look and they discovered Debbie, and she was very obviously deceased. Disney would pay a small settlement to Debbie's family, and then they would put up a number of safeguards on the America Sings attraction to make sure something like this never happened again. Just know that I really appreciate your support, and until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.